how to handle it when a man has acted very invested and committed to the relationship and then suddenly disappears. That's a little bit of a tricky question to answer without knowing a little bit more about what you mean by he was very invested and how he committed. Like, was the commitment something that you verbally discussed? A little more specifics would be helpful. But what I can say is that, there is this, as I mentioned already, this sometimes where a man pulls back, and it depends also on how long he's pulled back and how long he's disappeared. But sometimes they're just going into their cave where they just kind of need time to kind of recharge. And other times it's the rubber band syndrome where a man kind of pulls back. And then in the rubber band syndrome, what often happens is a man will pull back. And sometimes from John Gray's perspective, he believes a lot of this has to do with hormones and a man's hormone level. I don't know if I put quite the emphasis on the hormones that John does, although I think there's something to his theory. But I do believe that men will often have a tendency to pull back, kind of like, stretch back like a rubber band. And it's often in that time that a man realizes that he misses a woman, he has a chance to miss her, and that can actually help him to recognize the depth of his feelings for her. And then he sometimes has the desire to reconnect with her. And so, that's something to consider. I don't know how long he's disappeared for, and I don't know what you mean by very invested or committed. I know that it's frustrating and feels scary and feels disappointing when a man suddenly disappears. And usually, in my opinion, is, again, I don't know all of the circumstances here, but usually giving it a little bit of space and time. I have this saying that says, when in doubt, wait it out, right? So see what happens, give it a little time. I don't know how much time you've given it. Let's see. Ellen says, I don't know if you're familiar, but I recently moved to Mexico and seems there's a lot more adventurous women than men expats here. I don't know about that. I'm not really familiar with how the expat situation with women and men. Again, though, a lot of times we focus on numbers and statistics and, there's this many single women over 50 and there's this many men single over 50. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily feel like the odds are in our favor, but I think the odds can be in the favor of any woman if you are in the right place from an energetic standpoint. Like, I think you can, even if there's more women than men expats, I think you can still attract someone if you're in that energetic space and you're putting yourself in situations where you can meet and attract high quality men. And yeah, there very well may be more of them. I'm not terribly familiar with that. And I haven't worked with a lot of people in Mexico, so I don't have a lot of specifics there. I wish I did. I'm sorry about that. I've worked with people all over the world, but I haven't worked with a lot of women in Mexico. Leilani, I agree with what you said, equal inner conflict. Yeah, this is a thing that comes up for a lot of women. And, to some extent it did for me as well. So I get it. I've wanted a divine man romantically, and I love my freedom. See, you notice this? One thing I'm noticing here, Leilani, just to bring this to your attention, you capitalized, I love my freedom. So you kind of have to see what's weighing heavier in the balance. The truth is, though, here's something we don't always realize, is that you can still have freedom in the context of the right relationship, the right kind of person. You can still have you can still have that dynamic that still allows for a lot of freedom in the context of the right relationship. Peggy says, thank you, Michelle. I agree with you. If a man is not putting an effort in the beginning by sending a message, then he's not worth my time and effort. Love your webinars and you putting together the webinars with other relationship coaches, especially the men coaches. Yeah, those are the man panel series in my Mr. Right Academy that are available. Many of you may have been on one or more of those. All of the interviews are now housed in Mr. Right Academy. So you have access to get a lot of wisdom and knowledge about men from the male perspective in Mr. Right Academy. Let's see. Ellen says, thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you. You're welcome. My pleasure, Ellen. Thanks for being here. Anonymous says, yes, we discussed that we were both looking for a long-term relationship and felt very positive about what we had, and we're both eager to see where things went. He's been gone for over a year now, so he won't be back. So I guess you kind of answered your own question there. I'm sorry to hear that. That's disappointing and must be painful, or must have been painful. So at this point, you have to say what's right for me, what's the best choice for me. And it sounds like the best choice for you is to do whatever you need to do to heal and support yourself so that you can move forward and find someone who is going to be there for you. Because, the words and the actions have to match up. And even if he said the words, if the actions aren't there, which obviously in this case they're not, then we have to stand in the truth and take in reality even when we don't like it, because it is what sets us free. And you want to be free to move forward in your life. Big hugs to you. Caitlin says, I've had several experiences where the guy pulls away, and instead of coming back, like with the rubber band syndrome, he ends up breaking things off. Do you have any ideas or suggestions for how to heal this pattern so that I can feel more at peace with allowing space during those times without panicking something is wrong? Especially since my experience, it actually has meant something has changed. Again, I'd have to know a little bit more about this pattern and what's going on for you. But, in terms of what the history is here, there are times when men pull away because they genuinely have decided they're not interested enough in a particular woman to stay. And this is why it's important for us to be centered in knowing our own value and to not overinvest emotionally or with our time or with our energy or with our focus or with our attention or with our love until we see that someone is doing that for us, is providing that for us. And so that might be one thing, is like taking your time on the front end is always, in my opinion, going to work to your advantage. When I say taking your time on the front end, I mean not getting too involved physically, taking your time to really get to know who someone is on a heart and character basis. See, we learn who someone is based on how they show up over periods of time. We learn who someone really is based on their patterns of how they show up over a period of time. And so what happens a lot of times for women, and it also happens sometimes for men, is we can get caught up in our idea of what's happening, and it's not always based in reality. Sometimes it's based in fantasy. I'm not saying that's your situation, Caitlin. I'm just saying this can happen frequently. And so what we need to do is we need to, in my opinion, give things time to develop and percolate a little bit. And I always tell people, one of the really fun and exciting times of a relationship is kind of in that early undefined stage of a relationship. This is one of the things that we have also in Mr. Right Academy, is some training on like how to recognize kind of landmines or potential landmines that can happen in the early stages of dating or further along in stages of dating. And also to recognize landmarks, to recognize how the relationship is progressing and if it's naturally progressing, and if someone is showing up with patterns over time that can lead you to have the confidence and belief that they're really invested in continuing to get to know you and in a relationship. So hopefully those things are helpful. And you are also just saying something that's also worth mentioning. I do think when a man pulls back, generally speaking, like I said, when in doubt, wait it out. It's okay if it's okay, depending on how long you've been in a relationship, especially in the early stages. When in doubt, wait it out. Give it a little time to percolate and see what happens. Because see, you're not just finding out if he's interested in you, if he's into you. You're seeing whether or not this person deserves to have a high priority status in your life based on who he is and how he's showing up. See, it's like I almost want to flip the switch a lot of times, because a lot of times what we're focusing on is he like me? Is he into me? Is he invested in me? Where in reality, I'd like to flip the switch a bit and say, how am I feeling when I'm around him? How am I feeling when he's not around me? Is he making effort to be in contact with me? Is he putting effort and energy and intention into this? Am I feeling like we're energetically matched here? Am I feeling like I want to continue to invest my time and energy and attention into getting to know him better? It's like almost kind of flipping the switch and thinking of this this early dating stage period as a time when he's auditioning for a place in your life, not in a conceited and arrogant way, but in a way where, you know what, your time, your attention, your love, your affection, these are some of the most precious things you have to give. And someone needs to be worthy of that from you before you get too invested in that. And we only learn that by allowing for that time to percolate. And these early stages where things are kind of undefined is actually a really delicious time, but we have a tendency to want to rush through it so that there's definition around what's happening. And I think slowing things down in the early stages typically gives a better result. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Leilani says, I went on a date with a divine man. He asked me, what do you need from a man? I was in shock. Well, how nice to be asked that, right? How to answer this without sounding too over the top. So I don't know if you have to filter yourself, like sometimes I think the sooner we really put it out there as far as what we really want or need, the more we give that other person an opportunity to have an idea of as to whether that's something they would be able or willing to provide. So sometimes being unfiltered kind of makes sense. You're being real, you're being authentic. So a question I love to ask myself and sometimes my clients, and I just think it's a thought-provoking question in general, is this question, and that is, if you could have it all your way, what does that look like? So he's asked you, what do you need from a man? So my question would be, if you could have it all your way, if you could have what you needed from a man, what does that look like? Answering from the heart, being real and being authentic sometimes scares people off. But you know what? If it scares them off, they're probably the wrong person. They're probably not the right person for you anyway. So how nice that he gave you an opportunity to answer a question like that. That's beautiful, right? Beautiful.